guys, welcome. Now, did you know that one of the many requirements by DVLA if you want to apply for a license to drive is to be fit? Yes, fitness to drive. So today we are going to dive into what constitutes fitness to drive. Fitness to drive goes beyond just your physical well-being, or it doesn't have anything to do with having muscles or whether you are fit to jog or run or anything. No. Then again, your physical health and well-being is very important. And like I said, it goes beyond just that to include your mental state, right? Now, there are some of them that are going to be very difficult to regulate by law. So, as an individual, you are tasked to take personal responsibility of those things. However, for those that can be regulated by law, they are, stated into law. Now, as we go along the lesson, you understand what I'm saying. So let's dive right into the physical well-being. Now, assume that you're a committee member of the DVLA who has to vet, anyone who wants to apply for a license. What are some of the things that you are going to look out for? Number one, let's look at eyesight. Eyesight is very, very important. Over 90% of the decisions you make while driving are based on what you see. So obviously, if you can't see very well, then you don't have any business being on the road. So as a requirement, DVLA will ask you to do an eye test. And if your eye test results prove that your eyes are good enough for the road, then you are given the license. So this applies to new applicants and those who want to do renewal. So when you are doing your renewals every 2 years and replacement every 6 years, your eyes are checked to make sure that indeed, they are good enough to be on the road. And by law, both eyes should be in good condition. So you can't say this eye is 1000% powerful. If this one is not working, you are not eligible to drive. So that's the first thing. Secondly, let's look at hearing. Do you think your hearing ability would affect or impact your driving in any way? I'll leave this to you to decide. Then again, it is very, very important. Drivers communicate by use of sound and, through your horn, siren, sometimes through verbal means. And of course, as a driver, if you can't hear anything, then it becomes problematic on the road. Now, DVLA will not ask you to do a hearing test, no. But usually, in course of the test, especially when you're doing your driving test, an officer is going to sit by you and be giving you instructions to drive. So maybe go straight, turn left, turn right, park here. And if you're not able to hear and give feedback, then it's going to be a problem for them. There's no DVLA officer who would certify you to drive if he comes to realize that you have a hearing problem. If you use hearing aids, fine. But then if you have hearing problems or hearing challenges and you are not doing anything to resolve it or nothing has been done, there's no way you'll be given a license to drive. So hearing is very important. Next on the bill, all limbs need to be intact and fully functional. That's your arms and legs need to be intact and fully functional. Now, this is actually law. Now, when this law was instated, um, only manual cars were available then. And for manual, you all know, both hands on the steering. Occasionally, the other arm does the change of gears and comes back. And there's no way you can manage with just one hand. Your feet, the same. You always need both legs to be intact and fully functional because for the manual, you need them both. One for clutch, the other one for brake and accelerator. So if you had just one leg, how would you manage? So since then, so many decades have passed, and now we have semi-automated and fully automated cars, self-driving cars in the world right now. So this law has become a little bit more archaic. So an amendment is going on, and the amendment is basically going to include people with levels of disability. Now we have cars designed for people with different levels of disabilities. So at the end of the day, the amendment is going to be like if anyone does not meet the first requirement I mentioned, both arms and legs being intact and fully functional. However, a car has been designed to suit their disability. They should be tested and allowed to drive. So we have cars today that don't require legs to drive. Everything is in the steering compartment. All you have to do is sit down and then you manage the controls and drive. And people with maybe disabilities or maybe people who have lost limbs, yet they have cars designed for them, should be allowed to drive and not be discriminated against. Next on the bill, it shouldn't be under the influence of any drugs, medication, or alcohol. Drugs, you have the narcotics, Indian hemp, marijuana, and they put you in a state of mind that is not conducive for driving. So please don't drive under the influence. Secondly, you could have medication. Your doctor could prescribe drugs for you, which are very strong, and because of the side effects, would give you an excuse duty not to even go to work. And some of them, you'll be advised not to drive. Same as your pharmacist. You buy drugs, they'll tell you because of the side effects, don't drive. Now, this you need to take personal responsibility and not drive, because no policeman or law enforcement person will know that you have this condition and therefore you shouldn't be driving. So these are the key areas where you need to take personal responsibility for yourself. Then again, you shouldn't be under the influence of alcohol. This one too, you take personal responsibility. Don't drink and drive. Next on the bill, you shouldn't have any sickness or disease that can compromise driving. This one is also a little bit difficult to regulate. Okay, diseases like epilepsy, right? Of course, if you are not mentally sound, you can't drive. Now, when it comes to epilepsy, it will be very difficult to detect, because it's not like there are people walking around with epilepsy have it written on their forehead, and it's not every day that they are triggered to have an attack. I personally saw someone under attack some years back, and it really frightened me. I didn't even know what was going on till a bystander told me that the person is having an epileptic attack. And if you are familiar with epilepsy and then the side effects, imagine someone sitting behind the wheel driving, and all of a sudden they get an epileptic attack. I don't know what triggers it anyway, but I mean, it's not going to end well. So such a person with epilepsy, they can go to DVLA, apply for a license. No one will know. Maybe everything goes well. Maybe when it's time for the exam and driving test, they'll go do everything. No one will know. And then they will still have this disease there, underlying disease there. So how does DVLA regulate this? So when it comes to this issue, making it a policy will put a financial burden on every applicant. Imagine there were a list of diseases like epilepsy and maybe other stuff, and every applicant was asked to go and do a medical checkup to clear certain disease before they are, allowed to apply for the license. This is going to put a financial burden on every applicant, and I'm sure the money you spend on doing the labs and tests will even be more expensive than the license you are going to take. So this also becomes a personal responsibility to the applicant. Now, yes, some people are going to be careless. So usually, if the condition or disease is very, should I say, obvious, like when you come, they see it on you, per the officer's discretion, they are going to ask you to go and see a medical doctor for the medical doctor to declare you fit to drive before they proceed. I once saw an applicant who came, and apparently a young guy, he had been on drugs for some time, but he had stopped. After stopping, he was experiencing some withdrawal symptoms. So he's sitting there and his hands are shaking, and sometimes he has to hold his arm. And the officer asked him whether he was okay. He said he was fine, and he'll be okay for some time. The next moment, he's fidgeting. So because of that, per the officer's discretion, his license process was withheld, and he had to see a doctor to clear him, fully clear him to be fit to drive before he was allowed to go through the process. I wasn't there to follow up on what happened, but what I remember is he was asked to go and see a doctor to be declared fit to drive before they could proceed. I don't know how that story ended, but ideally, that is what the officers are supposed to do. So if you have any condition which is so obvious that, I mean, you go and they can see per their discretion, you could be, asked to go and see a doctor to be cleared for medical fitness to drive. Okay, now here are some controversial ones, and let me ask you, viewers: would you discriminate based on height? I know Don Little drives, but I'm going to leave this to you. Would you discriminate based on height? Would you discriminate based on old age and also pregnancy? Do you think pregnant women should be allowed to drive? Drop your answers in the comment section. Let's get interactive. Now, for these ones that I just mentioned, there are things that you can easily regulate and put into law. But the other aspect, which is also very equally important, is the person's state of mind. For that one, you can't regulate by law. Of course, confidence is highly required for driving. But then how do you use law to regulate confidence? When you are driving, right, one of the most important qualities, like I said, is confidence. And when you are doing your driving test and you are low on confidence, it reflects, and the officer can decide to fail you on lack of confidence. Okay. Your emotional state of mind. You see, these are things that people easily take for granted. Your state of mind is very, very important when it comes to driving, because when you are driving, you need that clarity of thought to be making good decisions as you drive. So if there's anything that is having an effect on your way of thinking, and you can't think clearly to make good decisions, you are literally going to become a hazard on the road and be causing unnecessary accidents. So for this one, it's tailored towards your taking personal responsibility for yourself, psyching yourself up before you drive. And a lot of things people take for granted, your mood. A good mood would reflect in your driving. A bad mood would also reflect in your driving. So any state of heightened emotion is not good. So you are very anxious, you are angry, you are upset, you are highly disappointed, you just got a broken heart, your bed slip, got spoiled. And then in that, heightened emotion state, you go and sit down to drive. No, it is not going to go well for you. Okay, maybe you went to work, you were told that you had been laid off, and with the heat of the moment, you're going to sit down to drive, and or you just received a call that you had, lost someone dear to you, and then immediately you are going to drive. Now, some people, based on experience, will be able to handle this, stress, because some people are mentally strong. They'll be able to handle this to drive. Not everyone will be able to handle this stress to drive, even though some can. So, especially for new drivers, I would entreat you to be, make sure your state of mind is very important. Don't take it for granted. If you are in any state of heightened emotions, when you sit behind the wheel, whether you're angry, disappointed, heartbroken, whatever it is, take your time, psych yourself up a little, and then what? You proceed with the driving. If you are angry, calm down first before you proceed with the driving. If you are extremely anxious about anything, sit down, calm down first. If it's a prayer you want to say, you pray, then you proceed. But then don't go and actively drive in that state of heightened emotion. I've seen someone driving before, and it's almost like she was driving and she wanted to she was projecting her anger onto the road, and it didn't go so well. Okay, so your state of mind is very, very important. And always remember, fitness to drive goes beyond just your physical health and well-being, but your state of mind. My instructor, who taught me how to drive, always say that driving is done in the mind and not with the heart. Driving is done in the mind and with the mind and not in the heart. So at the point where you are in a state of heightened emotions, where this part is taking over, this part will not be able to reason well to drive. So take note of this anytime you are going to step on the road. Bye for now, and I'll see you some other time. Stay safe.
But the work is done. It always will.